The hardest part about getting a big buck is getting where you can see him. You know, and the rest of it should hopefully come natural besides the buck fever, you know.
Michael Perry, state record holder for non-typical muzzleloader buck in the state of Alabama, shot on public ground. He's been hunting public his entire life.
All of these deer were shot, you said, from this wall all the way over Alabama public.
All Alabama public, yeah. All right here.
Alabama state record, Michael Perry. Did you ever dream that up?
No. I was hoping, you know, praying to get one in the Pope and Young. That was, you know, you never thought about no state record.
If you're not from the South, no matter where you're from, whether you hunt public or private, Michael Perry has decades of experience of hunting hard to hunt areas, and you can take some things that he's learned over the years and apply it no matter where you're at. Here we go.
Prior proper preparation prevents piss poor performance.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for having us here today. We've had a really fun trip, you know, in Tennessee. Now we're in Alabama, and just want to thank you for letting us into your house. And oh my gosh, when we walked in here, I know Luke has seen pictures of this. I don't think I had any expectation when we walked in here. And
Really?
My mind was blown. You got a beautiful room in here and some awesome stories. And I think everyone should be excited to watch your Whitetail Cribs, because the passion and excitement in your stories, you can just, it's very apparent and clear that you love this, you love telling your stories, you love helping other people. And I just want to say thanks for having us here.
Sure, thank you. I appreciate it. I mean, this is almost like a bucket list item, because I've been watching the Whitetail Cribs for a long time. So what's kind of funny, I guess, because you probably thought I was crazy, like you started sending that message. I was like, and I think Jamie Kay had said something about, I don't know if it's a scam or what. I said, I've always thought, yeah, I'd like to be on that. So we kind of went through some little hoops to, you know, to get verified, because you don't know how it is nowadays. So, man, I appreciate y'all offering and come out, because it's, again, like a bucket list thing to be involved in that. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was our pleasure. We haven't, I think this is probably the furthest south we've ever been. And we were talking just off air, like the South gets a reputation for sure. And I feel that you're kind of the, you got some big deer in here, man. You do.
Well, I appreciate it. So
yeah.
But it is hard work. But yeah, I mean, we have the potential, you know, and kind of specific places in the state. You know, of course, you can have an outlier where something crazy blow up, be a big buck somewhere, but generally, it's tough in Alabama to get a big deer. So if you look at one of these in here and compare it to the Midwest, you need to add. So if I got a 100-inch deer in here, it'd be like a 120 or 130 somewhere else. You know. So
yeah.
We just don't have that genetic like y'all do. So.
Yeah. Well, no, I think that just makes it all the more rewarding. And even just, you're talking about some of the size of the areas that you hunt. And I was joking, I'd be lost as could be down here. You know, 90,000 contiguous acres. Right. And just really big unbroken ground and relatively flat. Is that a fair? Or
no, the 90-something thousand is no, it's hilly. It's
okay.
hilly.
Okay,
you'll
it's
have
hilly there.
500, 600, 700 elevation changes. So.
Yeah. What I also find interesting too is you work swing shift, regular guy.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's very relatable for most people. And you know, you have this room of memories and hunts, and you got some big bears, you got moose. And how'd you do it? Because people think Michael must have hit the lottery. He didn't tell anyone though.
Well, you can ask my wife. We're both, I guess you could say, soft of the earth people. A long story short, like at 17, I was tired of dealing with the home life. I just was not happy with it. So as soon as I got through my 11th grade, I taught my dad and mom into signing where I could go into the military. So I left, and then flip over to my wife. She grew up through a hard life. She remembers toting water to have water to bathe in and all that stuff. So we kind of just met and be able to create what we did. And so you figure I didn't kill a deer. My first buck, antlered buck, I was 30 years old, a little 5-point. So now I'm 60. So 28 of them years I was working swing shift, 12-hour swing shift, drive an hour each way, you know, and still to be able to kind of do what I do is, or have done is, you know, I think decent impressive anyway. So yeah. I don't want to brag or say it's overwhelmingly impressive.
I'll brag for you.
But
I'll brag for you. It's impressive.
And then again, just basically a normal plant working person, and then to throw in some bear hunts, some Alaska hunts, and moose hunt stuff. And I think we talked about a story. I was talking to somebody at work. Well, how in the world do you pay $25,000, whatever, to go bear hunting. I said, man, I'm standing here in the same plant you are. We're working at the same place. I said, if I can do it, you can do it. So it's just prioritizing stuff and having the passion and wanting to do some of them things, is what, and having a wife that's understanding and likes doing that stuff too. So,
yeah.
And really, we have a blessed life, so I really enjoyed it. So,
yeah. What's a piece of advice that you wish you knew when you were in your 20s that you know now after, and it could be hunting or about life?
About life, one thing is investing. If I knew more then that I do now, is investing, using, say mutual funds, stuff like that, finding somebody that you can talk to, do that early and do it. And then another thing is for hunting, buy preference points when you're young
Yeah.
to be able to do other things in the lower 48, versus now, once you get older, it's tough.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of good places past 10 years of drawing. So that's the two things I think, and then of course, find a wife or partner that's, same mind process about things you want to do.
Well, I can tell that, I got one of your books here, and even just she's your hunting partner,
Right.
And I think that's really cool.
Right. Yeah, life partner. I mean, we do everything outdoor, anything like that. We love doing it together, and just a variety of things, and we don't have any conflict about any of that. So it's just amazing to meet somebody like that she never really hunted. So her dad was a quail hunter. Then once we started, after we had our son up a little bit, actually we carried our son when he was a little bitty and just set him in the base of a tree, and he'd be asleep in a few minutes. But so we kind of worked that in and just done it together we've been married 34 years, so 30 years of it anyway. So
yeah, that's really, really awesome. And I feel that you mentioned you were 30 when you shot your first deer, or 31.
30 when I shot my first little rack buck,
Yeah.
5 points. So it's just 31
So,
when I killed my first decent buck.
I think you were saying you trapped when you were younger and did small game.
Yeah, we didn't have deer where we lived at, so my dad, first thing he started out doing was duck hunting. Then they went to rabbit hunting. So, and they also done some commercial fishing. So we didn't have any deers. And once they started deer hunting stuff and the trapping thing, that was the only thing that I could do. I wanted to be in the outdoors so bad. So I conned him. We lived in like a small town. I said, I want some traps. So he fixed me up 3 or 4 traps and a choke stick thing that you're supposed to have by law. And I took off on my bicycle, and he just made me a cheap choke stick. And I took off on my bicycle and found some farmland that joined some woods and stuff. And then you can, people didn't care. You could do basically whatever you don't do, squirrel hunting or trap, whatever, on anybody's land. So I set me some traps. And the very first night, I caught a big old raccoon. And that choke stick thing that he made, by the time me and that raccoon got through, that raccoon tore that choke stick up in just a few minutes, because they didn't think I was going to catch anything. I was 11 or 12 years old. So anyway, I finally got that raccoon took care of, and he couldn't believe it. So once I'd done that set the fire in me about, the outdoors period. Trapping with tracks and, trying to get an animal to put its foot on a piece of steel that's 1 inch, and say 50,000 acres or wherever it is you're trapping. Just you learn how to, read sign better. So trying to get an animal, a true trapper was a trapper that could do a blind set, meaning there's no scent, no bait, being able to position the trap, make it look like the natural environment where the animal wouldn't notice and catch it. That if you could do that, you're a bona fide trapper. So learning how to do that, and I did when I was younger, just helped you about reading sign and stuff. And that was my introduction to the outdoors. Then we moved back to my grandpa's land, which was some backwater areas that had fox and muskrats and beaver and all kinds of stuff. So I got to broaden that trapping, because again, I was too young to go really. What hunting I did was limited, and be like Daddy would just put you somewhere. So seen a few deer, but I never killed anything until I was late 20s. Once I got out of the Navy, and then me and Kathy got married, then kind of got situated, started hunting more, then started being successful. Then, some of the stories you'll see in that Whitetail Cribs about things that happened while we're hunting to make our mind think about, starting getting focused more on a mature buck. So
yeah,
passing stuff.
I mean, a lot of people say that. I mean, we just left Bobby Worthington, so woodsmanship obviously is top of mind. Do you think there's any truth to the fact that, someone that can trap effectively can easily translate that to being a much better deer hunter, being able to read the woods?
Yeah, definitely helps because, a lot of people that you run into, younger guys, they're learning what to look for as far as scraping a rub, but so they're not learning about tracks, droppings, different size droppings, different age of droppings, the different deer tracks, browse, small browse, nipping where they're nipping on buds or whatever. That part of it, that's the things you're looking for more while you're trapping the smaller sign, because them animals don't leave
As much
scrapes or rubs or anything like
Yeah.
that. So you got to look for more tracks and more subtle things. So it definitely helps better to me for deer hunting.
So you mentioned a couple things there. What do you think people overlook when it comes to tracking deer tracks? Because admittedly, I'll look at them, but what are some things that people really need to pay attention to with tracks that maybe seem obvious to you, but for someone that has never paid close attention to, what would you tell them?
Obvious deer track, like seeing them in sand and dirt, that's one thing. But like when you're in the woods, you see impressions in leaves and stuff like that. Like I like keeping gloves with me deer hunting, and you can take your finger and just move a leaf back, and you can actually slide your finger into the actual hoof. So noticing that, and it takes a little bit of eye to do that. So to learn where a big buck or bigger buck is using certain type of terrain that's not sandy or stuff, it's more leafy or more rocky, or where you wouldn't notice a track. So you got to actually kind of do a little digging, or raking back like you can even walking in places and feel an actual trail under your feet because the ground's a little bit more packed because they've been doing it for 20 years or whatever. So getting that feeling, and then because that's not that visual of a sign. So
what about when let's say you cut a big track, what are some of the first things that come to mind in your head? So you're walking, a big track, maybe it's in a creek bottom where you can really tell the impression, and you got to account for the softer dirt potentially for making the track look bigger. You come across one, what's the process from that point that you start asking yourself?
The first thing, you're looking at the direction, then you stop. Nowadays with the technology you got, the Onyx and any kind of outdoor app you got, you can hopefully either save that spot. If you can't get on it, look exactly, but pay attention to the area and look, see what kind of temperature changes is. And then once you get home or whatever, look at the bigger picture and see if there's any kind of food plot or if there's any private land close with food. And then, of course, while I'm there, I'm going to try to find some kind of secondary points or level changes, and then go up and down and try to just figure out direction, why that deer is going which way. Hopefully you maybe run into some rubs or maybe old scrape or licking branches, but trying to figure out why that track is there. Not just look at track, hey, there's a big buck there, so he's here. I'm trying to look and figure out why, what time of the year, if it's like postseason or whatever kind of scouting I'm doing, or if it's in season, tie that in why he would be there. So,
And then the other thing you mentioned was droppings. What are some obvious things to you, but maybe not others when they come across deer droppings?
Of course, bigger droppings. And then, of course, older droppings are going to be a lighter, drier looking color than newer, fresher droppings is going to be the shinier, slicker ones. And then if you're in a deer area that a deer using a lot, you're going to have the variety of droppings, from older to the new droppings. So kind of tie that in. Of course, if you have some big old, huge, compacted droppings, more buck related. So,
Do you think, I don't know if I'm making this up in my own head or I came across it somewhere, where like a compacted dropping, trying to say it the right way, versus, little milk duds is like the difference of if it's compacted, it maybe got up out of his bed recently, and then like the milk duds where they're is when they're up standing around walking around.
I've heard people say that, associate that with the bedding, and that maybe it's true to an extent, but I know I've come up on some of it be big, compacted, and the bigger pellets, and it'd be somewhere it wasn't a bed in here.
Yeah.
So it's it could be it got up from a bed from a long ways off, but I just think a bigger deer with them bigger pellets get compacted, because a bigger buck's going to stay. He's not like a smaller deer where he's like moving, traveling more.
Sure.
He's doing a lot more bedding at times, so
yeah,
it could be that related to.
Yeah.
But bigger is better is all I can say. So.
Pay attention to big signs.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. What's your obviously you worked swing shift, 12-hour shifts. You had X amount of vacation times. What's your favorite week to hunt?
Favorite week?
Favorite week. You can pick one week to pull your vacation. What's the week?
I was talking to somebody last night. I said, tell me what day if you had to pick.
Yeah.
And my day would be December 2nd. So,
okay.
And the big 158 over there was December 2nd. There's a 10-point blow on December 2nd. And then I think another one December 2nd. Then I've had ain't no telling how many run-ins with loud chasing and grunting on December 2nd. So that day, for this area, that area. So and then from right before Thanksgiving till first week of 6th or 7th of December is real prime in this area for me as far as visibility of seeing bucks.
Yeah. Is that what you would call the peak rut in the South? Like, would that be the November 7th in the Midwest is like November 7th in the Midwest is the maybe your 7th. Yeah. Okay. Well, is maybe the same translation to here.
Yeah. See, here we have, because we have implants of deer from different states from the 20s to now. So this area, the Black Warrior, the Bankhead National Forest area, they've done these doe studies, and they said the early conception date was November 13th. And I know that people have killed big bucks chasing around the 9th of November. So, but we'll have other places in the state. February is the rut. So you can start here from Halloween to February in Alabama and chase a rut.
That's a long rut.
So it's a long rut. You just go to different places. So
do you think Alabama has the longest rut out of the nation because of that reason?
Very possible. Georgia's similar too. Okay. So, but yeah, very possible. And that's what we do. We'll start out in one place through to the middle of December, go to another place, chase a rut through December, January, then mid-January to February 10th. Another place rut, so that's what we do. So,
wow.
I mean, it's enjoyable to do that, but not all the places have the bigger deer. So,
sure. What do you think the best deer hunters are doing right now in the summer?
The best deer hunters in the summer and getting ready for these shows, I would hope. And shooting their bows regular, and then maybe getting some of their gun stuff, maybe shooting some gun stuff, but then hopefully, I'm trying to get a little bit better shape, but hopefully doing that. But you're always thinking about it. It's always a year-round thing. I preach be familiar with your gear, be competent with your gear. If you're climbing sticks or if you're climbers, whatever, make sure all that stuff's in good shape. Take your sticks out and learn that. The saddles and all that stuff. Just the more competent you can be and more familiar with your stuff and trust your equipment because you're only going to have a few seconds to make it count when the hardest part about getting a big buck is getting where you can see him.
Yeah.
Then the rest of it should hopefully come natural besides the buck fever, So, but being able to shoot your gun, bow, whatever it is you're hunting with, keep that going year round. So most big buck killers, I think, are always got it on their mind.
Yeah.
And trying to be prepared because the 7 P's is what I pitch. Prior proper preparation prevents piss poor performance. So you don't want to have some kind of crazy excuse when you mess up. Try to be as prepared as you can. So.
Say it again. The 5 P's.
7 P's.
7 P's. Okay.
Yeah. Prior proper preparation prevents piss poor performance. So.
Was that a Navy saying?
Huh?
Was that a saying in the Navy or?
No, I had an old school teacher, I think his name was Mr. Maddox. I think he had 6 P's, but he left one word out. So, but anyway, that was one thing that stuck with me in life.
Yeah, you apply to deer hunting. It really applied to everything.
Applied with everything. So really, so just try. Big buck hunters are all. It's not a fluke most of the time for your serious hunters. So, just like some of the guys y'all just got through interviewing. So it's kind of a different mindset. So
yeah. With how big this, it's a lot of unbroken, big, huge terrain. How far do you think some of these deer travel? And I know every deer's different and everything else, but from what you've seen running cameras for over the 15 years, you got an example, or I guess what's normal, and if you have an outlier?
What's normal? Yeah, well, I've got an outlier. Normal, like the biggest one I killed with the bow, the 141 something. A guy had pictures of him 3 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
So, in velvet, a bunch of pictures in velvet. So, that's not that big a deal. I know one guy a guy had a picture of a big buck, and it was killed a couple of days later, and the guy had the picture of it was 8 miles from where it was killed. So, in just a few days, and you got like power line ways and stuff like that. If they get after a doe, if they just get walking checking for a doe, they can run them power line ways for a long ways quick.
Mm-hmm.
So it can 8 miles probably wouldn't be at. I mean, in certain areas could be pretty manageable, but most of the time 3 or 4 miles I would think.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's during their rut roaming. Their normal core is going to be different. So
What would you say about the normal core?
I think the older they get, the smaller it gets.
Mm-hmm.
So
have you seen that over the years with trail cameras?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of these deer you're mentioning, had multiple years of history, or at least had known about some of the deer for multiple years.
Well, I've only killed one that I had multiple history with, but I've had several of them that died that I knew they were there in this general area, and just you get pictures of them and just never got to see them. So, but or somebody else would kill them. So it's very unique how they. That's another thing I preach. At night, a big buck can go around his area, go and learn where everybody parks at, how they access, where they go, and just keep up with that with their nose, and just completely stay away from people because they know where people ain't, and they'll be in some of the craziest places. So a big buck's trying to live, let alone eating secondary. He's trying to stay alive. So they'll find them places that's so unique by their nose at night, and a lot of people don't really think about that. They do so much at night.
Yeah.
That you just don't realize it.
Yeah, if you walk out, they live out there. We don't.
Exactly right. So.
Yeah. So all of these deer were shot. You said from this wall all the way over, and I know you had a Kansas deer over there, but all these are Alabama public.
All Alabama public, yeah. All right here. So.
How important when it comes to hunting public land is it? You mentioned buck scene where people are hunting, where trucks are getting parked, everything across the board there. How important is it to, for lack of better terms, hunt the hunters in order to have all this success?
It's very important to know where people are hunting, and I always look at that like some of the first places we go to the learner area. That's what we do is we'd wait till daylight, drive around, see where everybody's parked at, and then most of these man areas have dirt roads, or as you're looking for where tracks are coming from places, and then kind of looking where people are at. Then that gives you an idea to start somewhere. So, and then after that, some of it's repeatable. So, but yeah, you're always paying attention what people and how they affect it, because it affects the deer movement. So,
if you had to have the 5 most important things, like where does that fall in the top 5 of trying to get on big Alabama bucks?
Oh, the people thing, that's top 2 or 3.
Top 2 or 3.
Yeah.
What are the other maybe 1 or 2?
I just looking at the air and trying to learn it, and then looking at how things go point to one way. You know what I'm saying? So because does is the biggest key to me as far as big bucks, as far as the rut stuff. Keeping up with does. The more doe groups you can have in a general area with different points and ridge system and stuff, the better chance you'll have a big buck, coming through in the rut. Because I'm not specifically hunting one buck. I'm trying to find a big funnel or a big gap or something, or a pinch where multiple bucks are going to come through looking for does, or going to place looking for does during a certain time frame, during a specific week. So,
with that stuff, like hunting a pinch or a funnel, how easily for you? What? 2 questions. What's the deer density in some of these areas? Like on a typical, let's say a good above average sit during the rut, how many deer you might see in a day?
In a day?
In a day.
No, I went like a week not seeing one. the main big buck area. That's
sure.
It's not like it. If you can see a deer a day, that's pretty good.
So how do you battle the mental? Am I in the right spot when you're burning? Because we all. At least I do. I mean, it's like you only got so many precious days in a season, and then it's like, am I in the right spot? Am I doing the right thing? I feel like everyone falls into this. You start maybe second guessing yourself, but how have you been able to handle that or improve that over the years when you're seeing very little deer, but you think you're in the right spot?
Well, a lot of when I was young is overthinking and moving too fast. So you get older. As I got older, and trail cameras kind of help confirm that, is being patient and realizing that, a buck, most of the time he's not doing a bunch of dang crazy moving except during the rut. So, or unless he gets kicked up or, dog or whatever. So my goal is if I can get a chance at one mature buck a season, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Basically anywhere you hunt in the States, I would think. Of course, you got people who jump states and get to hunt multiple states. It's different. But so if you can kill, like we can kill 3, if somebody kills 3 mature bucks on public land in one season, let alone a bunch of seasons consistently, is almost unheard of to me. It's because it's that tough. So you're just looking for that one time. So I've sat many a day and not seen anything, but I know it just takes but about 3 seconds.
Yeah.
For one to be there. So because it's just trying to be patient and trusting your plan or whatever. So.
Do you feel like your odds increase the longer you're in a funnel? Because I feel like there's a counter. Like the thought is like, man, I've been here for 2 days and it hasn't happened yet. Are my odds getting higher or are my odds getting lower?
I do think that it's getting better if you're in the right place. Now, if you don't, like we'll have years like those big woods areas that we hunt. If you have acorns, it changes. That's one way. If you don't have acorns or if you have some kind of drought late things, they adjust. The does adjust a little bit, so you might not be in what you thought was the right funnel. And of course, you'll sit there for nothing. So if you're in the right funnel, I will sit like most of our the longest gun hunts we have is generally like a 4-day gun hunt. So I will sit a whole 4 days on that. So, and then of course our area is big enough. I'll move to another one for bow hunting because we can bow hunt in between gun hunts, and then I'll set it for the 3 days or whatever to the next gun hunt. I'll have specific places already kind of mapped out in my mind. And of course there'll be like this year, the first year I did not kill one on that main area in a long time. My wife did, a nice one, so I was happy with that. I passed up a couple, but it's not 100%, but the right time, the right rut, the right funnel. If you can spend daylight to dark, you've got a real good chance. And there's a couple of people that I know that's their thought process too. But the people that pick specific bucks, find a specific buck, name it, and say I'm going after Jim Bob. That's who I'm hunting all year. That's different. That's a different level person to me, and I can't do that. So I would think that'd be harder, to me. So.
You mentioned the variance of a season with mass crops. Do you prefer when there is a bunch of acorns, or do you prefer when there is a lot less?
Yeah, I struggle when there's not many.
Really?
That's just me. The monster one I killed, there was acorns everywhere, and some of the other ones, there's acorns everywhere. I think if they've got acorns, that's a bunch of carbs, so they're building up, they're getting their fat reserves built up. They have extra energy to show out, to make more scrapes, make more rubs, to actually do more adventures, and get to spar more because they got extra energy. They feel good. Versus years when they don't, then you have a drought or whatever tied with that. So naturally their body tells them you don't have the extra energy, so they don't make as many rubs. They don't wander as much. They don't have a real distinct rut. So I kind of leaning toward I'm more happy when they've got plenty of acres because I think they'll move more. And our big woods bucks, they're kind of more nomadic. They don't have to. They can browse and then go to a destination oak tree or whatever dark, so they can browse around on stuff. They got plenty of browse. They got other acorns everywhere. Then go to one of their favorite place in the dark. So it's just my.
You answered that differently than what I thought.
You got a lot of people think, well, the less acorns or minimum acorns, it's easier to pattern them. But I've not had that. Maybe in specific areas where you can find a certain kind of oak tree or something. But a big buck, I don't know. He don't like being where there's other deer at. So if other deer go to it, you're not going. He's not going to be there. Because he don't have to have it, especially in the South. He does not have to have as much calories in the North because of the cold. A mature buck here at 4 years old, he's already got his body up to size. So he's not like a doe. And a doe is raising a baby or getting ready to get pregnant, so she's got to eat, and then young deer are eating because they're growing. Big buck, he maximizes his body. That he don't take him long to get it back, so he don't have to do like other deer. So he don't have to just chase everything to eat. So So that's just part of my thought process on that. So.
Yeah. There's an article right behind my shoulder here. Hunting creek crossings the right way. I want to talk about that because I feel there's creeks pretty much all across the country. So obviously, do you feel that the tactics that we'll get into of hunting creek crossings the right way, do you think that's applicable anywhere where there's creeks in the country?
Oh yeah. So number one, it's an easy place to find tracks, easy place to find crossings. You know, as long as you some people have a struggle distinguishing a crossing versus the beaver slide or otter slides or something like that sometimes. But so finding a creek crossing that's got tracks, and then there's different ways to hunt a creek crossing. Going with the right way. Right way is just basically a title for that, but there are ways to hunt it better. So in mountainous areas, hunting straight on top of a creek crossing at times can be so tough because you got crazy wind swirls. So I always try to, if I can, tie a creek crossing into a long ridge system or some kind of thick pine system or cedars or a bluff gap or something that move higher up to minimize the way the wind swirls. If it's a lower area that's got a broad bottom, I'll hunt a creek crossing on top of it, but downstream of it, because generally a buck does not use the same crossing that a doe does. He'll usually be downwind of it or downstream of it because, that's how they live. They don't do the same things that other deer do. So I always stay downstream of it or downwind of it.
Like how far? And I guess, you find the pack down trail where you assume does and subordinate bucks are using, and then so do you think let's say creeks going north and south completely perfectly straight? There's no such thing as true north creek, but and it's a north wind, so you want to be south of the main trail, and you want to are you trying to find a more faint trail?
A faint trail or a faint track or a big track crossing there, or some kind of especially like a bend in the creek or some kind of terrain that's coming down close to that a buck is going to, because they don't like being in opens or whatever. They'll like just skirt to that edge quick. So downstream that to that point, something that's going to draw a buck to stay in the shadows or thicker timber or whatever, where does don't really care. They just getting across wandering, so they're not as nervous about being in open spots or whatever. And not being nervous because they're staying together also too, so they're going to be a bigger creek where a buck's always, just like I talked about earlier about that big 158, he was crosswind and downstream of some does, not following them directly. The only time I've ever seen a big buck following does directly on there is right specifically rut. She's hot chasing. So other than that, for just trying to keep up with them, he's always been off to one side or the other. So so that's kind of my thought process on that. But I always, I hunt creek crossing different ways. I've got some that I hunt straight on top of them. Some is because of the evening. I go in there in the evening when the thermals are starting to come down, where I don't have to worry about that crazy part of the wind. Then a lot of times in the mornings, I'm always going to be higher up, where I don't have to worry about the swirl down there. So
I know every time is different, but is there have you noticed any pattern of, the main trail and maybe the trail you're setting up to shoot? Is it, 20 yards south, 30 yards south, 150 yards south? I mean, for someone that wants to go and try to scout and find what you're talking about, what have you seen with any trends of, the faint trail you're more setting up on when it's a low, wider bottom, not one with a bunch of terrain?
Oh, the live water, the less terrain bottoms, pretty close. They'd rather be closer to the main trail. So, if you maximize your shot, say a bow, if you can shoot 50 yards, if you can do that. Most places down here you can't. So maximize what you can shoot to that. That's what I'm saying. So,
yeah.
And then, for gun hunting, is completely different.
Sure.
So you can maximize that more, and then I'll stay higher up on the guns more than I do. So bow hunting, you're just trying to stay closer, closer quarters, and sometimes when I'm gun hunting, I'm thinking bow hunting that my mind does. So I'm a little bit tighter with the guns, and most of the stuff I shoot is pretty close, like 40 yards or something. So staying, because you can look at a creek most of your creek crossings generally, you know, unless you're in real flat land, are going to be associated with some kind of terrain thing, you know. And then you also got to think, like, say you're driving down a highway, the median crossings, you know, they're very minimally used. The main traffic is on both sides, so you've got to figure out kind of why they're traveling on each side. Why would there be more traffic? You know, if it's running back and forth from food plots or from private land to cover, or from thick pines or thick cedars to food, or what? Why would a deer be crossing? Because a buck generally, does are going to stay closer to the food and travel back and forth, where bucks are going to stay more safe, you know, and then come across. So kind of putting that big picture thing and looking at it and then trying to figure it out, it can be, you know, tough at times, but trying to understand that part and then be patient, because it's not going to be an everyday thing. You know, you're not, just like we were talking about earlier, you're not going to see bucks every day. So you're just waiting for the right times.
Is creek crossings, if you're going into a new area, or even maybe even in Kansas, is creeks where you typically start first? So you go to the creeks first, try to figure out, you know.
Right. Drainage is any kind of drainage, anything that's got some kind of drainage where water's come through and you can find bare spots, to go easier spot finding tracks, or little dip or wore out spots where they've been crossing because they're going to drag their feet a little bit and make them little channels. So, and kind of be like a pathway out. So Kansas is a prime example. Was in the drainage, found, you know, good tracks and stuff, and then kind of looked where the area was and tied that in with some picked crops, and then, you know, set up, and it worked out. So, but that's just my easiest. There's two ways to do it. You know, the creek crossing thing, or finding tracks around creeks, and the other one is slow driving gravel roads in different terrain changes and looking for tracks, seeing where things are crossing, then making a big picture, trying to figure out why they're doing that. You know, morning versus evening, and then of course out in Kansas stuff, it's a little bit, I don't know if say easy, but a little bit simpler. So,
there's less to decipher.
Right. So
yeah, absolutely. When you're hunting these creek crossings, is that primarily, you know, around peak rut, or because as far as, yeah, I guess I'll keep it simple. I was getting in trouble yesterday for asking too many questions at once, so I'm gonna stick to one question. When do you hunt your creek crossings, or when do you have the most success with it?
I really don't say a specific time, because early season, you know, the easiest way to find, you know, early season is the toughest for me down here. So the places I'll start at early season is mainly in the evenings, that I'll come looking through these drainages and stuff and find where bucks have been bedding on these secondary points, whatever, and where they coming down and crossing creeks or little branches going to places, and I'll set up on them a little bit closer to the bedding, trying to, you know, catch them before they come off, you know, shortly after, before it gets dark. So, and that's another thing with any kind of hunting that I do, is I'm generally trying to stay closer to what I think suspected bedding versus the food to me. So just because I think, you know, they're going to leave the bedding before and hopefully in daylight to get to the food, or close enough in daylight when you get a shot. So, but yeah, I'll do it any time of the year, because most of the stuff we hunt's got some kind of drainage and stuff, and I've tied it in creek crossings to bluff gaps to bedding points and stuff like that, and it just depends on what the area looks like, exactly where I'll set up on it, but generally it's going to be closer to the bedding. So as long as I know I'm not going to blow it out with some kind of drifty wind or something. So
yeah, that's good. And I think one other thing too, to what do you guys call a creek down here? Is that how wide is a creek in Alabama?
A creek can be like you have to swim across it wide in places, but or
that's what I'm saying, because some people call a creek a river and a river a creek.
Right.
So
you got different terms, I guess. Streams,
Yeah.
brooks.
Yeah.
You know, a creek to me is just anything got water in it. So, you know, it don't have to be a specific name creek. Of course, you know, some of it just be drainage, but a creek is generally going to have water in it pretty much most of the year.
Okay.
Some
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Seems elementary, but you got to bring it up because everyone calls it different across the country. There's been places where you call this a river, this looks like a creek, you know, and vice versa.
Yeah, and a lot of that, like we got the Tennessee River here, and you know, before they dammed all them dams up, it was probably basically like what people call a creek. But since they dammed it up and it holds more water, it's pretty wide and deeper. So years ago, it probably wasn't like that. So
yeah.
Now the Mississippi or something might be completely different because it's got so much stuff running into it. So.
Yeah. What are you doing with your trail camera placements? Are you primarily putting them on travel corridors like a creek crossing or scrapes? What's your strategy for trying to find some of these deer on camera?
Very rare that I do scrapes. And generally, every postseason we go out. I've got some cameras that I leave historical, that's year round. But every year I'm looking for something new. So I go looking for creek crossing and find funnels. And then if I find a funnel I think I can hunt, go ahead and look for a tree. Because most of the time I'm not going to put a camera somewhere if I don't think I can hunt it. I don't want to be able to hunt it. To me, if I put a camera there and not going to hunt it, it's a waste of time because you're kind of limited on that. So I put it somewhere I think I can hunt it. If I can access it pretty clean, get to a tree without crossing any trails or anything or minimum trails, then I'll put me a camera there and leave it all through the whole season. Won't even mess with it and see what's happened during that and pay notice to the dates and see how many bucks has come across it. And generally, unless it's a monster one, if it's just smaller ones, I don't pay no attention to it. But if there's 2 or 3 good ones, then I'm going to try to be hunting the next year during that time frame. So I'm always trying to look for something different, something newer, and also your main areas always do runs on them, big circles looking for sheds, and because sometimes some things will change. Like this year, we're going to have a big change. Pine beetles is killing a lot of pines off, so that's going to create a different type of habitat.
More vegetation,
more, change some of the bedding, some of the browse stuff. It's going to affect stuff, so kind of paying attention to that and basically keeping up with your areas. And then sometimes they'll come in and log some of it, so
yeah.
So keep up with that. But
how many spots for this upcoming season do you already have in the back of your mind where, man, I can't wait to hunt that spot?
Probably 6 or 7.
Okay.
So, yeah.
The reason I asked that is because these are ginormous areas, and so it's not like I have 100 spots. So you've been able to narrow it down to 6 roughly. And how are you able to do that? Because I think most people would think, man, I bet you Michael's got 100 places to go. Now, you probably might have 100 places to go in the back of your mind, but there's 6 of them you're excited about.
Well, to me, my time has got to be spent, try to be efficient. So now that I'm doing some out-of-state stuff, so you only got 2 to 3 weeks in the main area. The first area we start at, right? Yeah. So pick that out. You can't have 10 areas and hunt 10 areas in that time frame. Yeah. Sure, you want a couple of backups just in case something fails, or if you're successful and get a good one, then you can move to a different one. So basically, I'm gonna have it narrowed down. Of course, I've got my wife with me, so we're hunting. We're usually tag teaming and stuff. We'll be within a half mile to a mile of each other. So having enough places to do that, but you can't have too many because you got to be able to hunt them. So I got prime ones that I'll pick out first. And the way our gun hunts rotate and stuff, that's during that time frame, you've got to pick it with that too. So,
and with those 6 that you've kind of narrowed it down to, is that based off of? So I assume it's based off of the funnel or the travel for that location, and then how much does trail camera intel play into that? I guess Xing out places and circling other spots with the red marker.
Yeah, the previous year's data, plays a lot into what I'm doing the next season.
Yeah.
Because generally, like right now in my mind, I already know what we're going to do pretty much, what we're going to start out doing. So
yeah.
Wait to see what happened with the Iowa draw.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, that might change something.
Yeah, so how much time that's going to be. But yeah, so I always a year ahead of time pretty much. Of course, you're going to do some early season. I do a lot more jumping around because I don't want to overhunt anything early season because the way they move more at dark, you're spending too much time there, especially if you think you got a big buck. He'll have you figured out pretty quick. So I'll just do that jumping around because it's so hard, early season for a big buck. So I'll do a lot of late evening creek crossing stuff or points where I know bedding points, are they coming down, or kind of stay up on the elevation where I think they might run if acorns are dropping, because some places the acorns will start dropping earlier, and I really like a red oak acorn, which we ain't had red oaks in, I don't know how many years now, like 6.
Really?
Yeah, so for big bucks, I think they like them red oaks to me for that.
Do you think that's just because your guys' rut is in December, and I guess that where I'm at, typically it seems like they eat the red oak acorns as a rule of thumb, later in the season after we have some frost and some freezing here.
Right. Yeah. The red oaks are usually the later ones. They hold
Yeah.
the leaves longer and stuff like that. They're usually later to drop. So, but we've not had them in a while. I think a red oak generally takes 2 years for them to make.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had some crazy weather or something. We've not had any red oaks for anything. But I think our bucks kind of prefer them. So versus the white oak. So, but that's just me. So
yeah. Well. Yeah. That's interesting.
if I can find, another thing is like early season, finding a bachelor group. If you can find a bachelor group, because generally if you got acorns, the bachelor group's going to do their spar and they're going to do some rubbing and stuff like that. And hopefully you've got a 130 or 120 or something that you can hunt in that bachelor group to kind of key on that early season versus a monster buck. Generally he's not going to be hanging with 4 or 5 bucks.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time if they're hanging with one, it's going to be like 1 buck. They just don't like being in a crowd from what I've seen. So that's generally harder to find them that early season because they don't do as much sign as them younger bachelor groups. They'll tear up, make rubs and scrapes, because they're kind of picking each other out who's going to be the boss of the group. Then of course when it gets close to pre-rutting, and they dispersed. So then you'll have a kind of scattered sign. So early season a little bit tougher because you got to find where the bucks from a whole 2 miles, they're kind of together. So with the exception of the monster one, so finding that sign, you might have to look around a little bit if you're trying to do that early season. So,
what do you think most people back to trail cameras? What do you think most people overlook when it comes to trail cameras, whether the utilization of them or the actual pictures or videos you get of a buck?
I think the biggest thing is they try to live by them too much.
Yeah.
I've done a little experiment one year. I've got a different area that's got way more deer and got some good bucks, a decent amount of bucks. So I put 2 cell cams now on one tree, pointed 2 different directions. And for 6 months, let's say the batteries lasted, one side of the tree had 1 buck, the other side of the tree, 15, 20 bucks over a scattered period of time.
So talk a little bit about that location too, because someone's probably thinking, well, yeah, the trail is on the other side, or something like that.
Well, we don't, like most of the time our bucks don't just run trails to me, they just browse around and stuff. But so if you don't, the point is like you might think you have the camera in the right place.
Yeah.
And you actually got turned the wrong way or something. I
Yeah.
mean, it just could be anything. So, and that was like a area that had some fingers that run down toward a swamp, and it just one side of the tree they were using more than the other, way more. And it just, I don't know. And you would think you would have more of it, see at least a few more, but
that is pretty crazy. 15 to
so,
1 or 16 to 1. That is insane.
And they've had where I killed the monster one. I had a camera there. The 6 or 7 point that come by me was on the camera, but the big one, he was down the hill 30 more yards, and he didn't come by the camera. So, I mean, that just a few yards can make a difference. So don't live by them, too extreme. So
yeah, it's easy to do because you put a lot of stock into them. I think everyone's fallen victim of that at some point.
Yeah. It's just you'd have to. I mean, you got people that backtrack deer with cameras. I don't run that many. I run enough.
How many do you run?
Probably 12 or 13.
Okay.
Like that. So, but that's all I can basically keep up with because I mean.
Yeah.
And again, I put them out and check. If I put them out in February to April, new batteries and all that, then I'll go back in August, September, check them, pull card, put new batteries in. Won't do them again until the next one. So it's just.
So you're not really paying much attention to in-season trail camera data.
In season or outside season?
During season.
That's what the data I want is during the season, but I don't use it for the next season.
So you use it, yeah, that's what I'm saying. So you're not using trail cam photos. We'll use this year for example. In 2025, you have your cameras. You're setting them, and you're not gonna. You put them out in August, and you're not gonna mess with them until February.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't like the monster buck. I didn't even know I had him on camera the year I killed him because I didn't check it till after I killed him, and I just so happened I had a couple of velvet pictures.
Yeah.
And on one camera, like a quarter mile away, and the camera where I killed him at, I had 2 sets, I think, hard horn pictures, and both of them was at night.
Do you think people screw themselves or shoot themselves in the foot by riddling? You mentioned like relying too much on trail cameras, and the other thing would be, I got to go check that camera. I got to go check that camera, and you're going into a sensitive area, and it's like, oh, I got a picture of him, and then like next time, he hasn't been in here, and then like, I haven't seen him since, and it's like, you're doing a lot. You're trying to get intel, and you're trying to do what you think is right, but do you think that happens too much for a lot of hunters?
You can overdo it. I mean, the more you go in there, the more scent. I mean, the more intrusion, or more you might walk by him. He's standing over at 50 yards watching you walk by, and you not know it. I talked to a guy last night, and he told me he found this big buck, and he knew it was there. Then he checked the camera one time, and he said he had a picture of this buck standing looking, and he come to figure out that buck was standing there looking at him in the dark, climbing the tree. And he never seen that, never got another picture of that deer right there in that camera. He ended up killing in a different spot later on, but that deer sat there and watched him climb that tree, and never come back to the area because he knew he was there.
Yeah.
So, or never at least didn't come back by in front of that camera. So might have come over and checked on him every now and then just to see if he's there without, because that gum deer is sneaky. I mean.
Oh yeah, I had one of the bigger deer I hunted once. I did a hung camera. This was before cell cameras. The next time I hunted that spot, pulled the card. I think it was November 9th when I hung that set. I checked it. I hunted in the afternoon, and then at 7 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, got a picture of that buck looking, doing that right at my tree. It was brand new, fresh set, and the game was on. He knew. I didn't kill him.
It don't take, but with them, like, cause they're trying to stay alive, so they know one thing, they know, hey, he's here. They know, Jake's here.
Yeah. so that's when you're in trouble. That's when you're in trouble.
Yeah. You're almost better off just going somewhere else. If you're aware of that, but a lot of times you're not aware of that until later or something, or not aware of it. So how many times do you think in your life or your hunting career that's happened to you without you knowing it?
I'd be scared to think about it. I'll be scared to think about it. I do think about that sometimes, of like, how many times did I screw up and I didn't even know it and never will know it. And I bet you it's a lot. I bet you a lot for everyone.
I climbed up on a stump one time in a cutover looking because another deer had jumped up. I'm standing there looking for like 15 minutes. Don't see anything, step off that stump, and a doe was laying 10 foot, blows out, take off running. So if I just stepped off the other side, she might not even jumped up. So how many times, bucks are the same way. They're not going to move until they feel like they're in danger.
Step on them, or you stay there long enough to get them nervous, So
that, it's spooky if you got to think about how many times, or if you've left a tree because, I don't think that's right, and then you go out, and then there's a friend of mine had to go to a birthday party for one of his kids, and he hunted and left, and he come back. When he pulled the camera 30 minutes after he left to go to the birthday party, a 13-point, I think is what it was, come walking by. So, if you think about all that stuff, it'd be rough. So.
You would need a bigger room if that was the case, if it didn't go that way. Yeah.
Oh,
what this I want to bring this up too, because you've mentioned specific areas, and then you in some of the pictures you take a picture of the deer in front of the sign, and I know. And the reason I bring up some I bring up on the comments or something here. So, what is your thought process behind that? Because people would say, Michael, why are you doing that? You're telling everyone there's big deer here. Why, that's silly. Don't do that.
Yeah. I used to write articles for a magazine, because you're trying to help. My thought is I'm trying to help people, number one. Trying to help people, get into outdoors, enjoy hunting. And then the number two thing is trying to promote the area. And I got a couple of points about it, but say, you know what bigger Saskatchewan is, right? Okay. All right. What's the county in Wisconsin?
Buffalo.
Buffalo County, Wisconsin. Okay. Pike County, Illinois. How do you know them?
You heard about it everywhere.
How about you've seen pictures of deer being killed there? Whatever the world records from Saskatchewan. So my thought is, if you want to go hunt public land somewhere, how do you know what to set? Or if I go to a different state, how do you know what to expect when you're hunting there, or what kind of goal can you set if you don't know what the possibility is? So me putting pictures of these big deer in front of these imaginary signs, lets you know it's not about me. You know, that's all secondary. It lets you, number one, it tells you what kind of deer is in that area, what your possibilities can be. Then plus it's promoting the deer, you know, the deer that lived that long and was able to get around hunters to get that big. So, but to me, it's the biggest thing is promoting the area, what the area can produce. That way, if you're a mature buck hunter, because most of these management areas are all specifically controlled on how they hunt and when they can hunt them. You know, what kind of gun hunt you got, muzzle or whatever. So they're not going to be over hunted. Especially a buck hunt, you can't kill too many bucks. I mean, it's hard to do. And especially if you go to thinking, well, I can kill a 190 or whatever, but I want to shoot a 140. So you pass the 90s or the 100s. So if you don't know that possibility, then most people go there, well, I'm going to shoot the first buck at sea because you don't know what the potential is. So to me, putting a picture of the bucks in front of the sign lets you know the potential of the area, what you can. You know, if you want to hunt bigger bucks, that's what you can do. So,
Do you think the quality of deer in some of those managed areas have gotten better or worse over the last 20 years?
better on some of them for sure. You know, like the one management area that I go to, they write down the ages and stuff on a sheet of paper. And like last year, I looked at it, and it's 80. I want to say at least 80% 4-year-old. You know, older. It's amazing. Very few. I don't even think there was a spike wrote down. Where you went over there 25, 30 years ago, there'd be spike, 3.4 point, whatever. You know, a bunch of smaller bucks shot. And now I think even social media, not just the science stuff, but social media in general has helped promote some of that and helped it better to be better. And then of course, I guess it's just people are starting to be a little bit more patient. But I think social media has really helped that. So.
That's a very positive outlook,
But a lot of people are negative about it.
Yeah, that's why I bring it up, because I think you have a pretty interesting perspective about that, and that's why I asked the quality. Has it gotten better or worse? And I feel like it's easy to fall into a rut of being negative about some of this stuff.
And don't get me wrong, I don't have like shooting spikes, all that there. I don't have no problem with that. I know that some people on public land is public land. I know there's some people that live close that they want to get their meat, and that's the easiest way they do it. The easiest meat to get is a young buck. So I have no problem with that. But I have a problem with people saying you can't get big bucks or whatever. Oh, you can't. Big bucks can't grow there or whatever. But yeah, they can if you want to do that. You're not going to. Well, I can't kill a 170, but you're shooting 100s every year. So if you shoot 100s every year, you're minimizing what you can do. So that part, just people got to get out of that. So it's just, I mean, wow, we don't need to create reasons to fight each other.
Yeah.
So, create reason to be a little bit better. So
there was something I picked up when you were talking about, you have the Alabama state record for muzzleloader, which is, did you ever imagine a million years that Alabama state record, Michael Perry? Did you ever dream that up?
No, I never did. No, after my brother killed that 180, I was like, man, that was the ultimate deer. I said, I'll never kill one that big, So I was hoping, praying to get one in the Pope and Young. That was, I never thought about no state record, because that's extreme level. So no, I wanted to get one into the record book after my brother did. So that's, I mean, that part of the competition is fine. But no, the state record, that's not why I do it. I never even thought about it. Yeah, it's cool, but it's about, I'm assuming it'll get broken in here one day. I think, it will be the easiest one to break for us, because it's not a 200 inch. So the rest of them in the state are 200 inches, so or over. So. But yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it and appreciate it, but it's more about the deer to me, what it took for that deer to get to that. So.
Well, and something that I picked up when you were talking about that, you said, I stayed out of there until November, because that's when I felt like I had a chance to hunt them. And I feel like anyone listening to this right now probably has a deer that's in the back of their mind from last season, and they're going to want to hunt it ASAP or start poking around.
Right.
And you had, maybe the discipline is the right word, to stay out of there until the time was right. How did you know the time was right? And just maybe talk a little bit about that. Because were you tempted to go in earlier than that?
Not this year. The year before I was, but after the cameras told me that specific week he was using it for some reason. Daylight pictures now, not the dark time, because nighttime. A nighttime hardhorn picture is just as good to me as any kind of picture, because hardhorn, he's in there for a reason. Velvet, they can change, they can move, drift off a couple miles or whatever, so move to a different area. But a hardhorn picture. But when that sucker's 2 or 3 years in a row, a hardhorn picture, daylight, same spot, same few days, and you can tie that in with rut funnels or soft funnels versus hard funnels. Deer traveling daytime, specific time frame, hardhorn. I always remember that. I've got a journal. I keep up with all that stuff. Look back at it. I keep all my big buck pictures on the camera saved on the computer where I can look at them dates. So them things mean so much, and that's why. Because if you go in there earlier and bow hunt it, say if I went in there bow hunting in that area for a week early season, and he smelled me or whatever, and then that makes him change gears. He's like, all right, Michael Perry's here. I ain't gonna be that gonna messing around daylight, so I'll switch over to my nocturnal stuff. So that's what I did. I was like you say, disciplined or whatever. I ain't going in there until that week. But as soon as that week hit, I was gonna be after him hard. I didn't make my mind up to tote muzzleloader all year, because that was one of my goals, was all the gun hunts, where it's legal, I could tote my muzzleloader and try to get another different record, and different deer in a record book for muzzleloader, because I already had the bow and a gun one. So that, then also I had bought a crossbow, because when them leaves get off, you can archery hunt the specific area where he was at. It's very tough. So I was saying, I'll get a crossbow where
very tough as in you had to cover a lot more area.
Well, the area was harder where he was coming through at with them daylight pictures, easier for him to see movement. So for the regular bow, you gotta be able to draw, get up and all that. And I said, well, bigger bucks I know he is, or thinking he's gonna be that year, I'm gonna tote that crossbow during the archery hunts, in between the gun hunts, which I never got to, because I got him on the first muzzleloader. So which is,
what were the conditions of that day? Did that match a front? Did that match anything else, or was it just right place at the right time? And
I believe it was just the right time frame. I don't remember anything specific. It was a little cooler. I do know that. Yeah, it was still real green. I remember that, because I only could see pieces of him in specific places. So that I do remember. But as far as any kind of storm or anything, no, it was just November 5th is all I know. So it was a little bit later in the morning, which I thought was kind of unusual.
Like what time roughly?
9:45 to 10. So most of the time, a big buck movement is going to be a little bit earlier than that. So or a little closer to daylight, I would think. So
what? I had a question
for that time of the year.
Yeah.
The rut time, any time during the day, mid morning is good.
If you had to compare November 5th to the Midwest, what would you say that, like, what would the dates, would it be like October 5th?
Probably, because he was swollen, his neck was swollen. It was like pre-rut almost, but he was still with another buck. Yeah. So he could roll that back in October sometime for his Midwest. So.
Yeah.
He still had 8 to 10 days of prime to get to the initial rut. So.
What I think is really cool about that deer, so many records are broke. I'm a deer nut. I like knowing the deer history, like not just learning about deer history in general, like as a topic, and you learn about a lot of these record bucks, and oftentimes the story is, I didn't know the deer existed, and I saw him, and I didn't know he was as big as I thought, and sure enough, he's the record. And I find it really interesting that you had known about that deer for multiple years and shot him, because so often that doesn't happen, which I think is really, really special, and I'm sure you feel that way too.
Oh yeah. That's one of my proudest things, to have that history and been able to do that, because you can ask, one of my friends, John McKay, for 3 years, I talked about him with him, hey, I think he's going to be this big, look at this sucker, so I missed him by one day this past year. Boy, I hope that sucker's still alive this year. And then when Jimmy comes up and sees it, he's looking in the back of the truck. He said, I'm sure glad you didn't shoot him last year. But that part of it means a lot, because, again, that history of it, because I don't have that history with any other deer in here.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that is really, really special. Anything else you think up here, Lucas? I mean, I got more questions, but.
Yeah, actually, I got one, I guess. So say someone from the Midwest, is watching this, gets a wild hair, yeah, I'm going to go try Alabama, I'm going to go try that Black Warrior wildlife area. Haven't been down here to scout, no prior knowledge of the area whatsoever. They're driving around, obviously, like you said, at first light, checking for trucks, seeing where people are hunting. What is the first thing, besides creek crossings, what would be the first thing that you would key in on?
If I come from out of state, there's any kind of openings, any kind of cuts and stuff, then I run into a guy from Florida last year or whatever. He come down and he got on some kind of aerial footage and found like some blowdown cut stuff. And he just walked in there until he basically jumped deer, set up, and killed a buck on the next day or two on the gun hunt. I'm talking about a nice one. And that's one of the different kind of old school tactics was that my dad and them grew up with. They would walk, used to you didn't have that many deer. They would walk till they jump a daggum deer and then walk sneak 50 to 100 yards closer to where it went and set up for the next couple of days, knowing that deer were in that area. So that's a tactic you can do, of course, the driving and finding fresh tracks and kind of looking and positioning himself. And, it could be tough. It's a lot different than anywhere else. So, but I would basically, just like a lot of people talk, don't hunt first, scout. Find something. Wait to, also wait to what you think is the rut or close to the time frame of the rut where you're going to possibly find more visible sign and see more deer activity. Then be able, if you do jump some, be able to set up and kind of have a little bit of confidence. So,
okay,
that part.
All right, and then now when it comes to when you were talking earlier about those creek crossings, the bigger picture, looking for the bedding area for the buck because that's where he's most likely going to be in daylight coming out of that bedding area as compared to being closer to the food source. We're in the lower part of the Appalachia chain here, so you got a lot of mountain laurel. Are you targeting more mountain laurel thickets for bedding, or are you looking more for timber cuts?
To me, I think them bucks is more the mountain laurel. The cuts, the sunnier points, does like that, they generally like the sunnier points. But them daggum bucks, that thick, nasty stuff that you can't hardly crawl through. I've went through a bunch of them. You'll find one spot and there'll be a bed, in it. And just like how the guys will even get in there? And I think sometimes they almost like they fly in. They jump 15 foot to get in there and lay down. So the mountain laurel to me, as far as the big bucks, is mountain laurel and darkness, dark timber, the dark stuff.
So a lot of your cedars, a lot of your hemlocks.
Cedars, the more the hemlocks, the more northern faces, you hear people up north talking about southern faces, but I think the bigger deer here, the cooler area, because that thermal stuff plays in the factor. It pulls down a lot longer during the daytime because it's cooler. So that's where they get the advantage on people. So that looking at that stuff, I think is real key for the big bucks.
All right, and then last question I have is, up where we're at, mainly more for him than me. It's a lot of, like when you're talking soft mass trees, so a lot of your fruit trees, guys are keying in on apple trees they're finding. Over by him, probably a little bit more of a mix of apples and persimmons, I would say. We're a little too far north in Pennsylvania for persimmons, but are you still seeing that same thing down here with, apples and persimmons, or is there like other soft mass fruit trees down here that you could potentially key in on?
We got some persimmons, on a lot of the public land, as far as anything else on public, you might find some kind of crabapple or something, maybe some old pear from some old homestead places, but the persimmon thing is, that's pretty key. That's around the first frost, I guess you could say. So finding ones where they ain't hardly, if you find one on a tree and there ain't none on the ground, you'll kind of look at that because they're getting eaten by something. So that part. So.
Now, we've done a bunch of content with John Eberhart, and he is, a big proponent of, you find those apple trees, odds are there's going to be a scrape under it. Does that translate to this area of the United States, or is there like a more specific tree down here that you could potentially find a scrape under than like your apple trees or your persimmon trees?
Well, I don't know if I've ever seen a scrape under a persimmon tree, but beech trees in certain places is real key. Some hemlocks, but that general area where we hunt at is generally some beech tree or maybe hemlock. But as far as being associated with a fruit tree, I haven't seen anything like that. But I don't mean there ain't.
Sure.
But of course, we don't have that many fruit trees on our public land. So, but beech trees is probably the number one as far as finding scrapes, licking branches. So.
And you mentioned you don't typically hang cameras on scrapes too often.
I've tried a couple of them. It just I had a daggum good buck on one, and I had the camera on. I climbed up a climbing stick and put it up pretty high, and that sucker still seen it. And never got another picture of him. So I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't have to do that. So the last time I done it, I just I've done a few experiments with some different scents with that, and it never paled out. So I just don't mess with them. So I just don't want to tie any kind of scent into any kind of, especially them daggum good scrapes, the ones that got the big licking branches where bucks use them year after year. I don't want anything to actually ruin it or whatever.
Yeah.
You don't. It's hard enough as it is. You give them another reason not why to come by there, or come by there crawling and peeping and stuff. Well, they see you way before you see them. So
yeah.
So, but yeah, I just try the minimum intrusion that I can do. I've learned that over the years. From the people I hunted with. My dad was one of them, but he always wanted to know what was over the next ridge. It's hard, so it was tougher for him to do that. So I got to where I could be more patient. So I learned to be more patient and just be trying to be confident. And then, it's worked out. So now I can be more patient because I don't have that pressure on, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But I'm still, I got the fire for it, but I know I don't have to. I know I don't want to chase. I don't have to chase my tail like a lot of people.
A little bit smarter. That comes with experience.
I don't have to leave deer to find deer. So it's just don't have that pressure and try to enjoy it more, and then try to enjoy it more with my wife. That's the biggest thing. So because she's the hardest hunter or worker at anybody I know, and she's had some close calls with some big ones. And one day, I'm always thinking one day she's gonna get one of them whoppers, and it's gonna be something else, because she deserves it. So, and she can shoot. So.
Yeah. One question: are all the Alabama state records? Have they all been shot off public ground? Do you know all the current records?
Not all of them. But there's I know the archery one is a public land archery non-typical.
Okay.
Not the typical. So, but I know there's two that's record. So.
Well, I don't think there's a lot of states where that's the case, where any records come from public.
Yeah. Well,
I'm thinking more Midwest specifically, but
that place is the only place I know of public land that's been more than 200 deer killed on it. So
yeah.
And then several 190s up. So.
Well, really appreciate your time here today. I really enjoyed visiting with you and getting to see all this. I mean, really awesome. I look forward to sharing the Whitetail Cribs episode with everyone. I think everyone's going to enjoy it. And
I enjoyed that. That's a bucket list thing right there. Been on Whitetail Cribs down here in Alabama.
As seen on,
Yeah. So I'm glad y'all came. Appreciate it, and really enjoyed talking to y'all. I mean, glad y'all made y'all's way down here from the north. So,
we made it a point to come down. Appreciate you inviting us in your home and giving us some venison chili. It was delicious, and just want to say thank you once again.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank y'all, man. I really appreciate it.
If people want to get, I can just tell talking to you, like, you truly do like helping other people. You wrote a book. I'm going to read it. Mm-hmm. And if people want to get maybe they have some questions or want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that? Because I can tell you truly enjoy helping others out of the kindness of your heart.
I don't know if I was telling you or somebody. So I had somebody just message me a few minutes ago that watches some of my stuff and just appreciate it. And I'll answer anybody, or I've talked to people on the phone, but Facebook Messenger is one of the easiest ways. We got a YouTube channel, 18 Outdoors. I got Instagram, it's 18 Outdoors. So that, any kind of message through that, I'll reply to all of them if I see them, and hopefully I see all of them. So I don't want to turn anybody down on any of that. I enjoy talking about it, and I appreciate everybody that's involved in the outdoor industry and all the hunters and stuff. So that's why we do it, for that. So yeah, just message me, personal message me. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Hey, thank y'all. Appreciate it.